it's the second session. It's all about interactive tools. And then we're going to firstly quickly review the questionnaire that everybody did. We're going to share some of the tasks that you did from last week. I'm going to show you some examples of interactive tools. Then we're going to go on to probably not the breakout rooms, because yesterday we didn't have time. Then I'm going to introduce the collaborative task, and we'll see how we get on with that. Just the task. So this was the question about which features you've already used. Some people linking to slides, we'll be going through that there. Embedding YouTube clips, most people are using them quite regularly, so we won't spend much time on that. Not many people using audio files, so we will be talking about that. Master slides and placeholders is pretty niche, but some of you may find it useful, but I'll briefly go through it. But it's not an easy aspect of using slides. Voice type speaker notes, dead easy, dead useful. And then live online question and answer, we will attempt as well, which is great fun as well. The features of forms that you've used in Google Forms, some people have not used a quiz mode before. You'll see that's very easy to set up, and it can be self-marking, generally with multiple choice. You can give feedback for the answers. We'll certainly be covering that, even though some people have used it, but just quickly covering it. But then branching forms, again, that's not immediately obvious, but once you've seen it once, you go, right, we'll do that. And then giving feedback on YouTube clips, again, is dead easy. And we'll also finish off with just using another couple of Google products, the drawings and sheets, to do the same, to do something similar. So we're just going to go on to the task that you did last week, and then I'll go on to the use of slides, forms, and drawings and sheets. So we're going to look at using now Google Slides and Google Forms and card sorts. Again, if there's anything you want to pause me on and you want to ask a question, please do so. Just put your mic on. Otherwise, I'll just keep rambling. But this will take close on 20, 25 minutes. But I will pause for breath in between times. So we're going to be looking at how to use links within slides for a board game, using visual organizer slides with speaker notes, live Q&A, audio files, and placeholders. Then going on to Google Forms with branched forms, video feedback, and then just a couple of very quick things using Google Drawings and Google Slides. So the first one is the idea of a board game. So I'm going to just demonstrate this very quickly so you can get the idea of it, and I'll show you how it's done. This was picked up from a sharing website by one of my colleagues at Melbourne, Claire Powell, and this is something we've used for a few years, where they play a game with dice, and each time they get to a choice here, whether the nitrogen goes in one route or the other, then that's achieved by using the dice that they work with. So online, obviously, you don't have a dice, but what we do is, and there's a video for explaining how to use it, is we've got an online dice using a YouTube clip there that you just click on to pause, and that tells you the number that you've just landed on. So if you land on a 3, then it says if your dice reads 3 or 4, then the algae and bacteria convert you into a soil bacteria, and then it takes you onto the soil. Then you roll the dice again. Just pause it at any time. We're on to 6 now, and then if your die reads 6, the denitrifying bacteria transforms you into nitrogen gas, and you go to the atmosphere. And so you get sent round that whole sort of nitrogen cycle using the simulation. So it's something we do in class, and what Claire's done is she's taken this, where each time this hyperlink here links to a slide within there. So I'll just show you how that is done. So if we had, if we wanted to go to, if somebody clicks on green, then you would again do insert and link, or Control K. And in this case, you've got not only the option of just pasting in a hyperlink to the to a website, but if you click that down, that gives you all the slides in the presentation. And you can choose any of those there that you want to jump to. So that gives you the ability to jump around all your different slides, a bit like we were doing with bookmarks, but this time it's between slides. The YouTube video, that's just inserted as a video. So in Google Slides, when you put in a video, it always defaults to a YouTube. You could put in a URL for anything, but quite often it gives you that as an option there. And then you've got various options here. A bit like we're talking about last week, you can start it at a particular time, end it at a particular time. You can make it auto play as soon as the slide opens. You can get rid of the audio. So it gives you a lot more flexibility with the way that you use your YouTube clips on a slide there. Okay, so we're just going to leave that one then and go on to a different use of slides. Anything about that before I move on? Okay. So this is Matthew Burke at Lochaber High School is a physics teaching colleague of mine, and he's, instead of using documents like I was showing last week for issuing assignments, he's using slides. The advantage is that it's easier to work with the graphics in the slides for doing just moving things around, and it's a lot more visual. He's able to use a lot more rich imagery and things like that in what he's doing. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things with the advantages of using slides as opposed to docs. And I know some of people think, oh, he just showed us how to use docs last week, and that was supposed to be so. Anyway, but there are, it's horses for courses. So here you can see this little loudspeaker symbols. If I click on that loudspeaker symbol, fossil fuels, then there's some audio that's been recorded there. And I'm just going to take you through how you can actually record that yourself and get those sort of files, those audio files, straight onto your. So this is the site which I would recommend, Online Voice Recorder, and it's dead easy because all you need to do is click the button and then start recording, and then go stop. Then gives you an audio file. You can then trim it, just in like that there, and then you save it, which is then going to download it to my downloads file. And once that's processed, that's available in my downloads file. Go back to the slides, and then if I say that I want to include that in the slide, I'll go to anywhere on the page where I want that little loudspeaker symbol to appear, do insert audio, and then I need to have it in my actual Google Drive rather than in my downloads. So you'd need to move it from your downloads folder into that. But once it's in there, then you would put it in, and then you can, various options, or you can loop it, things like that. And then that will, when somebody clicks on it, play back fossil fuels, and that's where that comes in like that there. So that's inserting video and audio into a slide, which is one of the big advantages. The other thing is, you can see at the bottom here, we've got speaker notes, which you can have in PowerPoint and have been around for years. So if we go on to the next slide, let's just go back to that. So if we get rid of those, and you can add those just by narrating using the voice typing in speaker notes. So this slide is about fossil fuels, and it's the difference between the fossil of a dead remains for dead plants and animals that have decayed over millions of years. The accuracy of it is, if you haven't used voice typing in docs before, it's disturbingly good, but it sometimes highlights things that you maybe want to go back to and review. The idea is that this could then be, if your slide is very image heavy and there's not a lot of text in it, then you can give some more explanation in the speaker notes down below. Okay then. We're going to go into what that would look like if it was presented now, and we're going to do a bit of question and answer using this here. So when you present, you can either have it just coming up straight up like that, or if you go in using presenter tools with presenter view, oh, hang on, I'm going to need to go back to just a second. I need to share my whole window now. I know I've been saying to share a tab. It's always nice when you're sharing a screen to go back and find out that everybody's still in the meeting. You know, because you sometimes worry that people have all disappeared. So I'm going to share my whole window this time, for the whole screen, for reasons which will become obvious now. Any questions before I move on to this? Nope. Okay, we're moving quite quickly. I appreciate that. Oh, Rachel, I'm seeing you're here. Do you want a chance to show your stuff from last week, or should we see how we're going for time?
I don't mind. I'm just, yeah, this is probably more useful.
Okay, well, we'll see how we get on, because yours was really nicely done as well. Rona, don't worry, all the links and stuff are on the Google Classroom, so you'll get all that, don't worry. Okay, now, right, my screen seems to have gone nuts here. Hang on, let's try again. Okay, so that's the slides which we're going to present. Now, you'll see that you get this presenter view in the window at the top here, which gives you a previous slide, next slide. A lot of people use this in any case if they've got two displays in class. What we're going to use here is what's called the audience tools, which you can also see down here where it says Q&A on the black bar that has things like the laser pointer and things like that. So I'll go to the Q&A. So the audience Q&A is, it allows you to ask questions if you have this particular code. So I'm going to put that in the chat box, and I'd like you to click on that, and it should open in a new tab for you, and then you should be able to get the chance to ask a question there with that code up there, and hopefully it will appear, your question will appear as a slide on here if I accept that question. So if you want to type in a question, and somebody shout if this doesn't seem to be working, because we had problems with this yesterday when I was changing between tabs and windows and things. Okay, thanks. So is Peter fossil fuel? So I think Sarah's come up with a really good question there, so I'm going to present that. And it just pops straight up on the screen over the place of that there. And I think Sharon's come up with a question. If you're looking again at my screen rather than the presentation, you'll see that it's, so that's what it would look like to everybody there. And then Sharon here, I'm sorry, Sharon, but I don't think that's a particularly good question. I'm not going to present that. And as for Angus's, it's not. So and then you've got various voting options and things there as well. Okay, so you can go back between that and your speaker notes. This would be very useful if you were doing a lesson in class, but you also had some people listening in at home. Instead of them trying to interrupt in a chat, in the Meet chat, they can just put the question up, and then you can review the question before you put it up on the screen. So that's the big benefit. And also in big, like our staff meetings at Millburn, we've got 100 people on the staff, and the head teachers looking at chat comments coming in and trying to answer them. It would be better if somebody else was fielding the chat with the presenter screen and then doing it that way. Okay. So just any questions about that before we move on? Because that's possibly a new thing for most people. It's something that only Google Slides does. I don't think that's available in PowerPoint. Okay, the last one is very niche, and I wasn't sure about putting this in, but some people might need it, so some people might use it, some people might not. If you're using a Google Slides to put your answers in, some kids will just mess everything up. They'll accidentally click on the wrong thing, they'll move the background around, and it just gets a bit higgledy-piggledy, especially if you're dealing with kids with additional needs. This slide here is got very limited options. So maybe there's been a question previous to this, and now they have to type in the answer. So they would type in their answer in the box, or maybe they were stuck and they could ask a question. And then that's all they can do. You can move the text boxes around, but you can't actually change any of that background text. That's locked. So they can resize the text boxes, they can change the colors of it, things like that, but nothing else. It's all kind of fixed for them. We do this using something called the master slide and placeholders in the master slide. So you go into it through slide, edit master, and then you've got various options. These are all the layouts that when you do plus, you get these. This is an option. What I've done here is I've changed one of the layouts and maybe changed the background and put in new text boxes. You've got two possibilities here. You've got a text box, and that's the, whoops, that's the thing that can't be changed. So if, for instance, if I was to put in, start again. So insert a text box here, and I just say, so I'll call that fixed text. You can change the font and all that sort of thing with it as well. But so that's something that the teachers put in. If I want somebody to type something in, if I want a text box that they're going to fill in, then in that case it's called a placeholder. So then you go right down at the bottom here and insert, look for placeholder, and then you've got three sizes of placeholder. I'm just going to use a subtitle placeholder, which is the sort of middle-sized one, and then this is the response. And you can't change what's in there at the moment. That's just going to keep saying click edit master subtitle style there. Okay. And then if we close that, and then underneath there, I'm going to do add new. That's of all the different types of slides that there are of layouts, my response box is a new master slide. And that's where my fixed text is. And that's where you would actually ask them to put their answer in their response. So placeholders are for pupils, text boxes are for teachers. That's the way to remember it. Placeholders, pupils, text boxes, teachers, if you're dealing with that master slide. Okay, so that's pretty niche, very useful for if you're dealing with kids with additional needs, I would say, but probably not so much for most classes. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the webcam because we've covered an awful lot in a short space of time there. So any questions so far before we go on to a couple of things? No, everybody's looking astonished.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so the link that you put in didn't come up as a link. So how do you actually get the question in? So when you put in the question, so it's the task before, I couldn't get the mic off task.
Oh, right, okay. So when you were trying to put the questions in from that link.
Yeah, so I opened up the chat and I've got slides.app.google.nrzps, but it doesn't actually come up as a link.
Okay.
Wondering what I would do.
It doesn't come up as a link, but you can just highlight it, copy and paste into a new tab.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I should have did. Okay, fab, thank you.
Maybe if it would work, maybe it would work better if I'd put HTTPS in front of it. Let's try that. Just from my own interest.
Sure.
Let's just try that just briefly. Yeah, I think that would work better. It's just, yeah, so maybe Meet isn't recognizing it as a link there. Yeah, that's working there now. So that would have worked for you. So that's maybe something to be aware of if you want to share it.
Yeah, that's fab.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so yeah, the online voice recorder, that will be shared when as a link in the Google Classroom. Okay, we're going on to Google Forms, and so I'll just share that on now there. Again, we're covering a lot here. This isn't, this is why it's quite good to have the video. You might want to replay some things if you get stuck with where what you were wanting to do. So you should be seeing G Suite Secondary Staff Questionnaire. This is a questionnaire for people to see what their skill level is in G Suite. And there's 3 sections to it. So it says section 1 of 3, and we're going to give people an option. So I'll just show you what it would be like if somebody was filling this in initially as a user of the form. So this is somebody who has been sent the link, are being asked about how good they are with all these various things, and let's just say Google Classroom are just complete ninjas. Gmail, oh, we really know what we're doing about with Hangouts and Meet there. And that's the first one there. And then the second one just says, well, if you've never logged into Chrome, you need to go to section 2, occasionally onto section 2, and daily, that's where you go on to section 3. Let's say we're using it occasionally. When we do next, that then takes us on to section 2. Next. That should take us on to section 2, but it's not. Why is it not? I messed around with this one yesterday. Oh, I know what's... Oh, right, okay. Right, we took the... Right, let's go back a stage. Right, so that's giving you an idea of what it would be like when we've made it work. So let's just set about making this work now. So if we go to the first questions, that's just a tick grid. That's okay there. The second question is we've got various responses. Now, to make this jump to sections, it's these 3 dots down here, which most people miss out on. I've made up different sections using the add section bit here. When you click on that, it makes a new section. So I've added a 4th section there. But if we just go back up to that section 3 here. So that's the basic use questions that we're after. So if we go here and we're saying, right, I want to go to that section 3, and I click on these dots, and it says go to section based on answer. And the other thing you can do is shuffle the options, which is great if you don't want kids to cheat during quizzes. But so if we say go to section based on answer, it gives us new options over here. So if you've never logged on to Chrome, we want people to go on to section 3, which is using basic use. If they've only occasionally used it, then again, we want to go to section 3, basic use. But if they've been using it daily, then we want them to go on to the section 4, which is for experienced users. We'll get rid of these 2 options that shouldn't be there in any case, and that's it there. So if we try using the form now, go through this. I need to put in responses there. With this one here, it's saying, right, if we want to go on to section 2 and then next, it'll take us to our new section. And then we've got various options and various questions that are to do with people who really haven't had much experience of using it. Whereas if you went on to the section 4, then it would take you through a completely different set of questions. And this is much more to do with more experienced use there. Okay. So if we go back to the editing of it, so the key things are to make sections and then jump between sections. This is quite good for if you're trying to set a quiz and you've got kids with different abilities and you know that some are going to need more remediation and some could need a bit of extension, then you could have 2 branches in the quiz. If we go to the experienced use responses here, so this says that somebody's, if they say they've had access to a shared drive and have worked, then the answer key to that has feedback. If they say they've, oh no, that's not the one. Sorry, there was one that's got this populated already. Yeah, so here if they say they've created a Google Doc, then good to hear that, and then you might find that task, which there's a link to there. And the link, if we look at the, you can put in a link to a task, or you can put in a video, which we'll come to in a moment. If you've got incorrect answers, then if they haven't used Google Docs much first, then it takes them both to this familiarization guide, which is a new link, or it would take them to a YouTube video. And just there. Okay, and that would take them through what they need to do to get better with using Google Docs. So that's, and just to show you how you would put in that, we're able to do this because this is set up as a quiz in Google Forms. So when you're in your settings, if you haven't used quizzes yet much, I think most people said they had, but you go on that quizzes tab, make it a quiz, and once it is a quiz, then it starts to do things like give scores for each question.
I'm not sure you're showing the right tab.
I'm not. You're right. I'm not showing the right tab.
Sorry.
I'm jumping around. I should have shared my screen for this. All right, we'll rewind a bit. So because it's a quiz, I haven't been sharing the right thing for the last while, have I? Right. I do need to rewind this quite a bit. Thanks for. Okay, let's go back a bit. So it's this question where we're saying that have they created a Google Doc? If they've answered this correctly, then we've got feedback for the correct answers. So you use this task and you can give a link to that task there. If they say they've not edited a Google Doc, the feedback for that answer is that they get this, look at this video, and the video would then take them to all that. Okay, so I think that's as far as we've got. So you switch the quiz on up in the settings here, and quizzes is up here, and you click that on there to make that a quiz. And at that point, you've got the options for those various, giving the correct or incorrect responses. So when you put in your answer key, it'll say, do you want to add feedback? And then you can give feedback for incorrect or correct answers just in there. And that's where you give the YouTube clip or the link to an optional website, things like that. Yeah. So again, that's just a hyperlink in there. Okay. Any questions on using those forms? Because we've just got 10 minutes.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you were to make all the questions required, I'm assuming that wouldn't work, because if they're not going to complete all of the sections, then you can't have the questions as required.
I'm not sure. I haven't tried that. I don't know, Sharon. Don't know. I think that generally, from my experience, most kids answer most of the questions.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, I had a question on that idea of jumping to the next section based on your response. Does it matter the order that you're putting the sections in? So, for instance, if I wanted like someone who's responding, their response required them to jump to, say, just section 2, would they then need to go on and do the rest of the sections, because when they click next, those sections are after, if that makes sense? As opposed to someone that was jumping to section 5, they would just do the sections after as well. So
no, you've got you've got this option here that gives you to be able to tell them what to do next. So after section 2, you can then either submit the form or you can go on to these other sections.
Right. Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it takes a bit of getting used to. I think it's one of these things that's worth setting up as a flow chart first, so you know what you're trying to do before you start doing it with the forms, because otherwise you can obviously move everything around in forms just by grabbing the 6 dots there. You can change the order of your questions, you can move sections around, but I think it's one of these things that having a clear idea before you get started is useful.
How do you see the bit that you're just looking at there? So see how it says after section 2, go to
Mhm.
blah, 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 blah. How does that just appear automatically and you can just
That
edit
appears
that?
at the end of the section. Yeah.
Okay, right, perfect. Okay, thanks.
So you've got those just set up there. I would love to say I've used this a lot, but I had to kind of just find out about it this week because I knew I was going to try and do it. I've known it's something, one of these things for years. I've known it could do it, but not quite how to do it. So I'm nervous on this. Let's see.
Yeah, I've wanted to do it before as well, actually, because I've got quite a few mixed ability classes in maths, and I don't want them to get bogged down with questions that get too difficult for them. So it's a good way of filtering it out, so they only have to do the questions that are tailored for them based on their responses. So I think it'd be nice to investigate how to do that.
Yeah. I don't know how it does with the scoring, depending on which one they go to and things like that, because it's obviously giving a total for all the points. So you'd maybe have to have the total number of points the same for all the options, regardless of the route they went. I don't know. That's a more educational argument. Yeah. Okay, right. Moving on. Just a couple of things still to do. The first one is using drawing. So drawing is the similar to what I showed you last week with using a drawing frame in Google Docs. This is just the standalone. And here, what we would normally do is get them to take bits of paper and put the bits of paper in order of the size of the fetus in the womb. So in this case, they just pull them all across, and then they can submit it once they're done like that. So that's just a nice, as you would do moving bits of paper around, but you can use drawing to do that. Another way to do that, if you've got text boxes, is using Google Sheets. We're going to be talking a lot more about Google Sheets next week, but here they've got to put these terms in the right place in the table here, and I'm more interested that they can just do it quickly and easily. I'm realizing I've got Angus here. I'm going to do this properly, just a moment, otherwise he'll say I don't know what I'm talking about. So you just move these across so they're in the right place, and then it's just a card sort. It's to be quick and formative assessment. I don't really want them to have their big page of notes. They can take a screenshot if they want to, but it's supposed to be the sort of thing you would do with moving paper around on a table in class. Okay, so that's everything I had in line. Is there anything again that people either want to chip in with, or any other questions from that before we start to wrap up? Okay.
Just to say, I've been using this quite often, like on Google Forms, like going from section to section. It's really good because when you start really playing around with it, you could have pupils, like if they get an answer wrong, you can take them back to part of the lesson if you include that into your slide, and it can take them back to whatever part of the lesson they need to read over, or whatever paragraph, and then they can attempt the question again until they kind of get it right. So it kind of does that thing where you would be in class and you would say, oh, reread this bit here, or it re-explains that, or whatever, and they can actually do that and go back and forth. I find it quite useful. Like if they've not been paying attention, they can, like, I can do that job for you if you're teaching from afar. It's a very convenient tool, I think.
Okay. Would it be possible to share that on the classroom?
Yeah, so I've got, there's a document that I've done that was more like for literacy purposes, for like kids are working on a book and they kind of need to read sections per section. So there's something I can share.
Yeah.
I'll need to share. So it's not entirely finished, but then
no, that's okay. But yeah, just at some point, because that would be good to see it done in practice. I haven't got any examples of it being used in practice, really.
Okay, yeah, that's I'll drop it on the classroom just now before I forget.
Okay. Brilliant, thanks, super. Okay, so just wrapping up here. Let's just share this. So that's all the things that we've kind of worked through fairly rapidly there, but there's things there that if it's, you know, if you think it's going to be useful, that's the one you're going to spend some time on. There's a lot of things there which you'll probably never use in your teaching career, regardless of how long we spend in this blended learning. We're not doing any breakout rooms, thank goodness for that. So next week, you know, is there something else that you could take, either further develop what you did last week, or do something in slides or forms or draw, you know, any of the other packages there, which would firstly increase the interaction, and could it possibly reduce the teacher workload by having something which is a little bit more automated? But again, it's got to be related to what you're actually trying to do in your teaching over the next week or so.